Welcome to the Steve Stine Guitar Podcast, brought to you by GuitarZoom.com. If you want to improve your guitar playing, keep listening. If you want to improve even faster, go to GuitarZoom.com, where you'll find all of Steve's premium courses, masterclasses, and memberships that'll help you quickly and easily improve your playing. Now here's your host, Steve Stine.
All right, testing 1, 2, check. Just making sure you can hear my voice and hear my guitar okay, and everything sounds okay. Let me know, please. Testing 1, 2. Hey, everybody. Thank you so much for being here. Hey, Todd. Hey, Rick. Awesome. This is awesome. Awesome. Yeah, thank you so much for being here. Now, just so you know, what we're going to be doing today is I'm going to be showing you 5 and probably more tips that I think are really important to guide you toward better guitar solos. Now, I've been teaching guitar for many, many, many years, and I've had many students worldwide. And I think one of my favorite subjects to talk about is soloing and getting people to kind of understand how some of us that have been playing a long time kind of perceive soloing, and oftentimes it's different than you think it is. And that's what I'm excited about tonight, is showing you some of these things and getting you to think kind of outside the box that you might be in, thinking, every time I solo, it just sounds like I'm playing scales and that sort of thing. So that's what I'm going to help you with today. Hey, everybody, thank you so much for being here. Now, I'm going to let you know that we're going to turn the chat off for me. That way I'm not interrupted and I can help you as much as possible for the next few minutes here and give you my undivided attention. Okay, so let's go ahead and get going. So the first thing I want to talk about is that when we enter the world of soloing, I think for most of us, certainly for me, the first place we start is we start by learning how to play a scale, right? Maybe a teacher shows us how to play, like a major scale or something like that. Or maybe we learn how to play a pentatonic scale. So we practice this element that I call by route, okay, or rudimentary practice, which is where you might set a metronome and you practice the same kind of motion over and over and over again. Okay, now that is a very beneficial style of practice to develop comfortability in the shape that you're learning. We'll call it a shape for now, whether it's a major scale or a pentatonic scale or something like that. Doing it over and over and over, maybe with a metronome or something like that, is going to develop a rudimentary sense of practice. What it doesn't give you is a creative perspective on how to approach making your solos sound more authentic, making them sound real, okay? So don't get me wrong. In my opinion, there really are no wrong things to practice. It's just depending on where you are and what you want, there might be things that are better to practice at that point in time. If you want to get fast and you want to be articulate and that sort of thing, and by fast, I don't just mean shredding. I mean, if a song is 120 beats a minute, you've got quarter notes and eighth notes and 16th notes as an option. And all of those create what we'll talk about in our discussion today, dynamic contrast, right? You don't want everything to be slow all the time because then it gets boring. But just the same, you don't want everything to be fast all the time because it gets boring too. So you want to learn to use contrast. And again, we're going to get to all of these things. So the first thing I want to talk to you about are 4 things that I think are really important when learning and performing a solo, when you're going to solo, okay? Number 1 is control. Now, control can mean a lot of different things. And again, we're going to go through these as we go. But the first thing is going to be control. Being able to execute something that you're doing on the guitar with confidence, with control, with a masterful execution, if you will. I hate using the word mastery because I don't know if any of us really master anything, but you mean it. Like, so when I'm going to play, right, I've got some different camera angles I can do here. So as I'm playing, now I'm not doing anything really fancy at this point, but when I move with comfortability, okay, with control. When I do a slide or I do a vibrato or I do a bend or something like that, again, don't get me wrong, I practice every day. I would never sit over on this side telling you that I'm so good and I know everything is so great. It's not that. It's that there are elements of my playing that I'm in tune with. I've been doing this long enough to where when I play them, they execute with control. There's always new things I can learn, just like you, right? But when I do play, I'm not playing with fear, right? I know what I'm going to do. I know, and I don't necessarily know in what order everything is going to come out. But when I do play, I'm very comfortable with the motions that I make with my fingers and the way that I do my bends. And my vibrato and all those sorts of things. So control. Now we're going to get deeper into all of this stuff, but I just want to set you up with kind of understanding the overview of what to think about. Okay. Now over the next however many minutes that we have this webinar, there's only so much we can cover, which is why the guitar course might be the next best thing for you after this, is to really kind of go deep into these things and figure out the whys and the hows. But so the second thing is connection to the music, not just having a jam track or a backing track playing and then you know what key it's in, so you go to pentatonic and you just start moving, but learning how to really make an authentic connection to the music, learning to listen and respond, right? Learning to feel the music, learning to feel the groove, right? Learning to react to the music as it's happening, the chord changes as it's happening, the tempo, right? All of those kind of things. And I've always used this analogy. It's kind of like if you're on the interstate and you're driving, right? You come up next to another car, or a car is passing you, and for whatever reason, the laws of physics makes one of the cars go faster or slower, and now you're driving right next to each other, right? So you're both going the same speed down the interstate, which is frustrating, right? But you're both going down the interstate at the same speed. You're both moving at the same speed, but there's no interaction. What's ever happening in your vehicle and what's ever happening in their vehicle, you don't know each other. You're not having the same conversation. You're not listening to the same music, whatever. You just happen to be going the same speed. And oftentimes with music, when we're learning how to solo, that's exactly what we're doing. We're just going out on YouTube and we're grabbing whatever backing tracks and we're just doing the same routine, right? We're just moving the same way. We're not really reacting to the music. We're just mathematically going, well, it's in the key of A, so I'm going to play in the key of A. Or it's in the key of C minor, so I'm going to move to C minor pentatonic. But we're not really paying attention. We're not really trying to figure out what's going on in the music. We're just doing this, right? We're not interacting at all. So I want you to think about that the next time that you try and solo, is really learning to maybe listen to the backing track a few times before you ever even approach soloing to it, right? Get to know it a little bit, because in the real world, if I was going to get up on stage and play with a band that I'm in, or maybe I'm just getting up with a band that I'm not in, but I'm going to jam with them, I don't necessarily want to wait till the last minute and then just hope that everything works out. It might be nice to have some prep beforehand to know what I'm getting into. Now, that doesn't always happen, but with my history of playing lots of songs and playing in lots of bands and things like that, the situations that I find myself in, again, I'm comfortable, I'm confident that I can work my way through that particular situation because I've done a lot of things. I've done prep on my own. Maybe I've never played with this band before that I'm getting up to jam with, but I know the situations that I find myself in, whether it's a rock thing or a blues thing or a metal thing or whatever. And I've done preparatory work on my own to be able to do that. Or maybe they say, hey, we're going to be playing this song tonight, right? So I don't want to wait till the last minute. Maybe I do want to jam over it a few times to make sure I've got some ideas in my head of how to approach that. So again, just preparing, being confident, right? And learning how to make some sort of connection to that music. Finding the right tone for that particular backing track, right? If I'm just using the same sound for every single thing that I do, and some of them are a slow blues and some of them are a heavy whatever, maybe I'm not really finding the right the right connection to that music, right? Maybe I need to, maybe I need that, right? But maybe I need, right? Now, I don't know how good this backing track's going to work, but I'm going to give it a try and see what happens, okay? So this is a backing track from Elevated Jam Tracks. They've got some really great stuff for backing tracks. And so I don't know which one this is, but I know it's in G minor. So as I'm listening to this, maybe I go up here. You see? Now the point is that I'm just trying to make a musical connection. I'm trying to listen, and I right there was a chord change coming. Okay, so I want to be aware of that on some capacity, whether I've charted this out, which I haven't. But if I really wanted to get involved with this, I certainly would. Kind of know what those chords are so I can respond to those. But I can respond even just with my fretboard a little bit by going to different places, right? Doing different things. So I quiet down. And again, we're going to get to all of this. So again, I'm not wasting your time. I want you to think about these. Get your head in a different brain space when you're thinking about soloing. So your tone, your approach to your toggle switch, your volume, all these things can make a huge difference in the way things sound when you go to jam over something. Be aware of that. Don't just, go in with the same sound over everything, the same rudimentary thing every time, because it's just going to sound the same and you're going to get bored and frustrated, right? So the third thing is comfort. Being comfortable with your guitar, comfortable with your amp, comfortable with your strings, right? Comfortable with your pickups, whatever these things are, comfortable with your motions on the guitar, right? Maybe you don't know all your positions pentatonically or whatever it might be, right? Maybe you only know a couple of those, but being comfortable with those things that you've got leads to confidence, leads to control, you see? So finding comfort in the things that you use. You've noticed that I use a lot of the same gear. I'm not a gear junkie, right? I don't own a bunch of different amps and a whole bunch of different guitars and things like that. I own a few. I mean, I'm almost 50 years old. So, I own a few different things, but I'm not on some sort of quest. If I can plug in and I can get a sound that works, like for me, my guitars are kind of where my comfort starts. Having the right strings on, I've played Ibanez my whole life. So, EMG pickups, this sort of thing is kind of where my comfort lies. And so when I plug into an amp, I know I can get a lot of different sounds over the guitar just by changing the toggle switch or the pickup selector and my volume knob. Okay, I can get all these places that feel very good. It's a comfortable place for me to be. Okay, so thinking about comfort is really important as well, not just in your gear, but on your fretboard. And you can always push the levels. You can learn more. You can learn different things, but then you want to take those and you want to make them, you want to bring them into a comfort zone so you can use them. And again, with that comfort brings confidence and control and all those other things. So, and the last thing is playing with purpose. And we're going to get into that when we go into these 5 things, okay? So playing with purpose, giving your solo a purpose, a direction. When you're playing, you're going somewhere for a reason, or you're doing something for a reason. You're not just, just moving around because you're supposed to move around because that's what guitar players do. I always think of soloing in certainly the bottom line of soloing is you're singing on the guitar. That's really what you're trying to do. Okay. You can go above and beyond and do other things, but at the base level, you should be singing on the guitar. So that's purpose. You're trying to direct your movements or direct your licks or your phrasing or whatever to have a point over what you're soloing on. So fretboard control, that's number 1. Fretboard control, fretboard mastery. Now, when I say this, please understand, go back to those 4 initial things that I was talking about. I'm not saying that you have to learn your entire fretboard before you ever learn how to solo. What I'm saying is, what I love the most about this guitar course is that I want it to meet you where you are already in your playing.
If you're enjoying this episode and you'd like to support the podcast, go to GuitarZoom.com and consider becoming a premium member. There are 3 memberships to choose from. VIP, which gives you instant access to a library of short but powerful courses as well as new bite-sized lessons each month. There's also Play Songs that gives you step-by-step lessons so you can learn to play your favorite songs fast. And finally, there's Masterclass, university-level training on everything from soloing to music theory, from blues to home recording. For more info about these memberships and all the premium courses available to you, go to GuitarZoom.com. Now back to the podcast.
So let's say you only know 2 positions on the guitar, right? Let's say you only know in pentatonic, you know your first position is what I call it. And you know your second position. Okay? So fretboard mastery to me means that you've got to gain control, right, over these 2 positions. You've got to learn how to manipulate these 2 positions so they become one, right? Which is where, okay, we'll get to that in just a second. So as I'm looking at my fretboard, I look down at my guitar and I see these 2 positions, and it's almost like the frets light up, right? Like one of those fret light guitars or something like that. I can see them. So I'm looking. So instead of just practicing the rudiments of going down and up across these positions, which I want to do, what I'm starting to do is I'm starting to see how they connect together. And here's kind of the little trick to this, or the secret to this, is when I practice rudimentary stuff, I practice with certain fingers, right? So as I'm practicing this first position, I might be doing this finger, right? 1, 4, 1, 3, 1, 3, 1, 3, 1, 4, 1, 4. And then I come up here, and again, from a rudimentary standpoint, I'm using 2 and 4, and then 1 and 4, 1 and 4, 1 and 3, 2 and 4, 2 and 4, right? Again, from a rudimentary standpoint, that totally makes sense. In the real world, when I start learning how to solo, those are not the fingers that I'm going to wind up using, because I'm coming from different places. I'm coming from somewhere and I'm going to somewhere. And these positions are just servicing my movements. They're like roadmaps. They're just servicing my ability to move around the fretboard. So logically, if I was here in the second position, I wouldn't be playing 2 and 4 with these 2 fingers, because these 2 fingers are very awkward, right? I'd much rather use 1 and 3 than 2 and 4. Now, again, from a rudimentary standpoint, using 2 and 4 makes sense because I want to develop those fingers, and that's all great. But if I was actually jamming, I was improvising, I was on stage in front of 2,000 people playing, right? These fingers are going to make more sense. That's where my confidence comes from. So as I'm working on my fretboard mastery, I'm not just working on rudimentary practice, but I'm really trying to think about my motions and the way I'm moving around the guitar, which leads us to number 2. Number 1, fretboard mastery. Whatever it is you know it with mastery, know it with complete control, whether it's 1 position, 2 positions, 3 positions, and obviously you can continue learning more positions, which is great. The more control you have of your entire fretboard, the more freedom you have, believe me. Okay, so fretboard mastery is really important. Number 2 is the control of your movements. Okay, so this gets into, if you've ever heard me talk about meandering, right? Meandering is a great little technique that you can practice where you set the metronome at a nice slow speed. Let's say it's going, and I'm going to play 8th notes. So I'm going bum, 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 bum. So I play. Now, if you've never heard me talk about mastery, meandering to me is a great little technique. It's not at this point, it's not a musical thing. It's a control thing. So what you do is you set a metronome at a speed that you can handle, And I call it brain dead. And I don't mean that negatively. What I'm saying is you're not trying to make licks and all this sort of thing. What you're trying to do is see how long you can move at that speed on the metronome in eighth notes without stopping. And you don't just want to play down and up. It's not a rudimentary thing. What you're trying to do is throw your brain a bunch of different, left hooks and right hooks and jabs and all this kind of thing where you're just moving around. So dun, 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 dun. And what you do is you try and encompass whatever positions you're learning. Maybe it's these two positions or just one position. But you set the metronome so you're going to just jump over things and move around, but you can never stop. That's the key to meandering. And what you're doing is you're gaining improvisatory control, your ability of being able to play brainlessly. And again, I don't mean that negatively, okay? Even though it sounds like it, I don't mean it that way. Your ability to manipulate the fretboard without playing in a rudimentary sense. Now, if the metronome's too fast, what's going to happen is you're going to keep stopping. And that should tell you, not I suck, but I need to turn down the tempo, right? I need to lower the tempo a little bit to find my comfort zone. And what you do is you just keep practicing this and developing your availability of being able to play brainlessly with the metronome as you keep increasing that speed. Now, the benefits to these, there's multitudes of benefits, but one is that you start learning how to play in a non-traditional rudimentary sense. So as you're moving, now I can slide in things too, right? So as I'm playing, right? Just over and over and over, just whatever, okay? So that's the first step. And what I'm doing is I'm training myself to be able to move in and out and get ready for the unknown, right? Because my pick and my slide and all these, and again, we're going to get into some of these things as we keep going, but all of these things are all working together as I start moving around, you see? So as you continue trying to work on this meandering, you're going to find that a slide tends to happen in a certain place. Well, that's good because that's you. That's the real you, right? You don't have to feel like you have to pick everything or you have to slur everything or don't live in that world. You just start figuring out what's working for you. So it's not just about how fast you can go. It's becoming aware of what the pick is doing and how you're moving back and forth and all these sorts of things. You don't have to memorize all these movements. They just start happening automatically as you practice the meandering, okay? So number one was fretboard mastery, learning to see and really be able to visualize one position or two positions, pentatonic, diatonic, whatever it is that you're working with, but truly being able to see them. If you can only see them with blinders on in a rudimentary practice, you can't use them in the real world. You've got to be able to visualize them. Then number two is practicing control of that movement, right? Being able to move back and forth, which is what meandering is. Now, number three, this is really great. Number three is phrasing, okay? So what we do is we take this meandering that we've been practicing with and without a metronome, right? Practice without a metronome just to get comfortable with the flow of things. Then you put the metronome on and you start trying to develop your ability to be able to move between these. If you add in a new element, like a new position, you're going to need to slow that metronome down again to develop that thing and then bring it back up. You might be able to play really fast with the first two positions, right? I shouldn't say fast, but really comfortable at a certain speed, certain tempo. When you add that third position in, all of a sudden that's new territory. So you've got to drop that metronome down a little bit and befriend this third position. It's got to become part of the other stuff, you see? And again, we're going to talk about all this stuff in great detail in Guitar Solos Made Easy 2.0. We're going to go way deeper with all this stuff to really get you to understand this. But then number three comes in, which is phrasing. What I love about phrasing is basically what you're going to do is take this meandering that you've been developing, this monster of being able to move around the fretboard. And what you do now is you start actually putting in pauses. or stops. Where before you were doing it because you weren't strong enough, you weren't capable enough at the tempo, you had to stop on purpose. Now you start stopping because you want to, not because you had to physically, mentally, but because you choose to. So now we take this thing. See what I mean? And all of a sudden, your music starts sounding like music. You're no longer just playing this rudimentary thing on the fretboard. It begins to sound more like music is supposed to sound, right? Now, it's not completely there, but that was a great shift from being able to see something, really truly see it, and then start creating with it, gaining control of the movement within what we can see. And then we start cutting it into pieces. Now, notice how the pieces that I'm cutting, these phrases, if you will, are different sizes. Sometimes they're long, sometimes they're short. Sometimes I stop. Ba-da, bum, 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 ba-da-da-da-da. But the meandering is still going on. I'm not just going... Right? I've broken out of that rudimentary practice, and I'm using the meandering that I've been doing. I'm just now breaking that into different kinds of pieces. Now, I'm not saying there's anything wrong with playing, up and down the fretboard. Of course you can do that. What I'm saying is most people get stuck doing that. And that's what they do all the time. And then they go, well, why do my solos always sound like scales? Well, as you start learning how to crisscross and back and forth and up and down and jump over things with meandering, it no longer begins to sound like a scale because you're not just going do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, back and forth like this. There's all these other things happening. And as you start breaking it into this phrasing and being aware of, I'll add another one. Perfect. I'm going to add another one. Here's a secret one. Okay, so this, I'm not going to label this. We're going to call this a secret one. Dynamic contrast. Or dynamic variance, although people get all crazy because they go, variance isn't a word, but I guess it is. But we'll call it dynamic contrast. Dynamic contrast is huge for me, which is if you've been doing something, do something else. Okay? If you were playing long phrases, play a short phrase. If you've been playing a lot, play a little. Or don't play at all. Stop playing. Play, don't play. Play loud, play soft. Play low, play high. Right? Pentatonic, diatonic. Contrast, always contrasting. If your guitar tone and the volume of your guitar is the same all the time, it gets old. If you play the same way on the guitar over and over and over, it gets old. It gets old for you. It gets old for your listener, right? So you're always trying to contrast. This is the secret one, right? So number 1, fretboard mastery. Number 2, control of movement. Number 3, contrast. Small vibrato, big vibrato. Half step bend, whole step bend, no bend, little slide bend. I mean, just it goes on and on and on. And I go into all kinds of contrasts in the course, okay? But contrast, you've got to keep shaking things up. I remember somebody telling me once, it doesn't matter how great a guitar player you are. If you play fast all the time, it gets boring. But please understand, if you play slow all the time, it gets boring. Okay, you've got to shake things up. You've got to constantly be contrasting. So with phrases, think about that. Big phrases, little phrases. Play, don't play, right? Those are really important. And when you're playing those phrases, you can constantly be thinking about... right? Whatever it might be. Okay, so that's number 3 because we had the secret one, right? So number 4, this one's huge for me. And again, we go into great detail. I don't mean to keep saying that, but I do. That's what I love about this stuff. The vocal elements. Hammer-ons, pull-offs, slides, bends, vibrato. Okay? If you learned nothing else, if you just learned the first pentatonic position and you learned nothing else, you could still really make that sound great by using these 5 elements and really learning how to manipulate them, play them with control, with confidence, with comfort, right? Bending, sliding. Let me go through those in order so I don't forget them. Hammer on, pull off, slide, bending, and vibrato. Okay? So as you're playing, right? I don't even know what I'm doing, so don't worry about what I'm doing. But my point is that there's picking involved, but there's also hammer-ons and there's pull-offs and there's slides and there's all these things. If I go back to that jam, and hopefully it works here. Maybe I'll go up. Should I change this? Okay, so you kind of see what I mean? I'm using my mastery of the fretboard. And again, when I say mastery, I do not mean that in a egotistical sense. I'm saying there are places I am very comfortable with going on the guitar with confidence and control, okay? So I'm using that fretboard mastery. My movement, I'm very confident with the way I move around the fretboard. I've done it a billion times, okay? Phrasing, I'm very much aware of trying to make this sound good with phrasing. Contrast, right? The secret one, right? Dynamic contrast. Playing high, playing low, playing loud, playing soft. Don't play at all, right? Let notes ring out. Don't let notes. It's all these different kinds of things that we'll talk about, but be aware of that in your playing. Even if you don't look at the guitar course, right? Be aware of these things in your playing. So vocal elements, hammer-ons, pull-offs, slides, bends, and vibrato. Okay, developing all of those things confidently, with control, with mastery, right? Oh, it sounds so funny when I say mastery because I just don't even, but you know what I mean. Just always trying to perfect it as best you can, right? All right, and the last thing, number 5, is melodic connection. It's one of the elements of purpose, giving ourselves melodic connection, right? So let's say, for instance, our chord is a G minor, like in this jam track. As I move around the guitar, if I try and go to the note G over that G minor chord, it's going to give my movement, my motion, direction and purpose, right? Now, there are many notes that we can go to, and there's many ways that we can learn about different notes that we can play, and we talk about this stuff in the course, but let's just talk about the root, right? G. So if I know where G is, I have a G here, I have a G here, I have a G here, and I have a G over here. I got G's all over the place, but I got a G here. So as I hear that chord, I might want to direct my motion toward that G. Or maybe come down here. Now, G isn't the only note we can target, but it makes logical sense. It's a great place to start if you've never thought about it before. So then let's say it goes to a C minor chord. That's the next chord. I don't know if it is, but let's just say it's C minor is my next chord, right? So C minor, well, what would be a logical note to try and target? C. Well, we have a C here. We have a C here. So maybe over the C, I try and go to this note. And then here comes G. You see, so now all of a sudden, I've got phrasing, I've got all these other things happening. and I'm using my vocal techniques and my dynamic contrast or variance or whatever. But now I'm giving myself some purpose by directing myself toward chords. As I know that they're coming, as I hear this chord coming, okay, here comes C minor, I can move and direct toward that. Now, there's lots of different ways to do this, okay? But this is a great place to start. Now, there's other positions on the guitar that you might know, and there's other G's and C's in those positions, and you can do all kinds of different things. And if you know some of your theory or things like that, you can land on other notes. You can, or emphasize other notes of the chords, which, again, we're not going to open that box of worms right now, but you get the idea, right? So as the chords are coming along, here comes D minor. And here comes C minor. And here comes G minor. You see? Now, you don't always have to follow the chords. There's no hard and fast rule to this stuff. I mean, if you're just kind of jamming and it's working and your phrasing is working and you're feeling it, or you came across some sort of repetitive lick and that's working, that's great. But dynamic contrast says, okay, when you get done, come on back to a melody. Come on back and make some sort of melodic connection. And then leave again. Go away. Go do something else. So you see that the opportunities are kind of infinite on all of the different things that you can do if you just start thinking outside the box of, well, my teacher told me to learn this position. Yes, absolutely. You got to do that. But there's a ton of other things that you could do on top of that that are really going to send you into more of a creative space. So again, not to take up all of your time, but because I want to close this out pretty quick here, but when you practice, like let's say you practice on a daily basis, every day you should definitely work on some sort of technical aspect of your playing, which is kind of a rudimentary thing, right? To a certain degree, you're working on scales or positions or whatever it might be with a metronome or whatever. And then you're working on your technique of bending or your technique of vibrato, right? You need more work on getting a better vibrato. So you work on these different kinds of things, okay, to better your ability on the fretboard, better your fretboard mastery, better your technical skills, all these different kinds of things. Maybe you work on speed exercises or something. That's great too. But learn to spend a little time every day in what I call the creative space, which is not always being tethered to a metronome. It's just exploring the fretboard and the sounds that your guitar makes and the sounds that you're able to make on a comfort level, right? All the dynamics that you have within yourself and your gear, being able to kind of manipulate those things. And that doesn't happen with a metronome. It happens with paying attention. It happens with exploration, right? So this stuff isn't going to make you faster, but it's certainly going to make you more intuitive. It's going to make you more knowledgeable about the sounds that are actually created on this fretboard, right? So when you hear a G minor chord, learning to go. Now, again, you're not just going to do that if you've never done it before, right? You got to be introduced to these things, which is, again, what the guitar course is for. But learning to listen and hear how the things that you're doing responds to the chord or the music that's being played underneath you. It's really important. So again, my job here today with this webinar is just to try and kind of change your thought process on all of the things that are available to you that could really make you into a better player. And I don't just mean that technically, I mean the way you feel about yourself, right? Because that's really important. If you feel good and you're having fun, you're going to practice more, you're going to want to do this, you're motivated. And oftentimes as a result of all that, people are going to listen and they're going to sense that excitement, right? They're going to sense that motivation in your playing. And that, is a response to an audience, no doubt about it. If you're digging what you're doing and you're confident with what you're doing, people that listen respond to that, on a positive level for sure. So next time on the Steve Stine Guitar Podcast, today what I want to do is talk to you a little bit about the importance of understanding appropriate melody. And by that I mean oftentimes when people go to solo, they use their analysis to figure out what key they're in and what scale is appropriate, and all of that is important, no doubt about it. But oftentimes when we do that, we wind up just putting ourselves in a situation where, again, we've got the right answer, but we're not really making music with that answer. Let me show you what I mean. So in this particular chord progression, what I've got is a D chord and an A chord and a B minor chord, and a G chord. So if you know anything about your theory, I'm playing a D, G, and A, which is 1, 4, and 5, and then a B minor, which is 6. Hey, Steve Stine here from GuitarZoom.com, and thank you so much for listening to this podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, can I ask you a favor? Please subscribe, leave a review, and share it with a friend. Your feedback means more to me than you'll ever know. And be sure to check out my YouTube channels where you'll find over 1,000 videos to help you with your guitar playing. Thanks again for listening. Stay positive, keep playing, and keep having fun.
If you'd like some help with your guitar playing but you're not sure how to get started, go to GuitarZoom.com and look for the Help Me Choose survey. By answering a few simple questions, you'll get Steve's personal recommendation of the perfect course for you. All this and more is available for you at GuitarZoom.com.